supposed to speak about the real estate market and where it's going in 2025, or where we think it may be going, and what it presently is today. And so basically, looking in Westchester, and we'll speak about Westchester first, and then we can speak about, nationally. It's up about 11.5% in terms of it's still a seller's market. So things are selling relatively rapidly, although in houses are staying on the market slightly longer. And 48% roughly of homes that are on the market have sold above asking, which is quite a good sign. The median price in Westchester County has risen really dramatically to $162,500, which is, as of October, is the most recent statistics we have, and that's like a big increase from last year. So that's really it would be interesting to see maybe in other parts of the tri-state area where the median price is, but in Westchester that's a significant jump. Things are staying on the market a bit longer, and which is a slightly good sign of the increase in the inventory. NARS, the National Association of Realtors, predicts, and you can chime in on this, of where the interest rates, we know that they just went up, right? That they just increased in the last week or so, or 2 weeks, but they predict going forward that they should settle around somewhere between 5.5% and 6%. Are you hearing that as well, Marie? I think Marie froze.
Huh.
That's so strange.
Yeah.
Marie? We don't have the technology to unfreeze Marie. Let me see if I get that. What have you read?
Well, listen, obviously, right, I'm on I'm on the mortgage side, on the financing side. So most of my reading and stuff is in regards to interest rates. And, it's been really confusing to people because they hear that the Fed is making these rate cuts, and therefore they feel like mortgage rates are going to, should be now be lower. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case, right? I think the Fed did, honestly, maybe they did too big of a cut in September, and rates have really done nothing but kind of come up since then.
Right.
Of course, we've had the election since we've last spoken, and now I think I read this morning that it's been confirmed that, we'll have the same party in the Congress as well as in the executive branch. And, all of these things, make it such that I don't expect rates to change anytime soon. Now, we still feel like rates are going to come down in 25, right? They're going to be, and by the way, like, they're lower now than they were this time last year. So, I keep telling folks, like, the right time to buy is right now. It's when you are ready to buy. If you have the money, if you can get the financing, if you're trying to time it with, like, when rates come down, because I don't think we've seen prices in real estate fall since this time last year. So now you could literally get a better rate than you were getting this time last year.
Right.
So I look, I think it's very much, I think that we are, like, have our fingers crossed, and we're hoping, like, so much so that we would see, like, a big drastic change in interest rates.
Right.
But I think it's going to be more of a gradual one. Although I do feel like it is that we are going to see rates, by this time next year will be lower than where they
That's
are this time this year.
everything I've read. That's what they predict, a couple of more reductions in the next, let's say, after the new
Right.
year, for sure.
Right.
The interesting thing is that with what they're saying, and to your point, that you really are going to gain equity or wealth, as for some people, if you buy a home. If you're renting, if you cannot, and you're still renting, you're not going to really gain
No.
any equity, wealth in your home. And the wealth is really, it's interesting that they said that people, at least in Westchester, in the $2 million range, have really, because they've been in their homes, let's say, a significant amount of time, they've been or able to buy a $2 million home, which is a lot, But in some areas in Westchester, that's the average or the median
Right.
price. So it gives them ability because they've owned other homes and they've kind of gained wealth or incurred wealth
Right.
by owning property. And they're able to really buy up and into a much larger home and a much more expensive home.
Yeah.
It's also interesting, I think, to say that today the first time buyer is roughly 38 years of age, which is probably older than in former times.
Right.
And because many buyers have been reluctant to enter the market because of the high interest rate or the higher interest rate, if they perceived it, or jumped from where it was a few years ago, let's say the 3 percentage point. And I think that a lot of buyers have been reluctant to enter the market because of the amount of higher bidding that had to go on, when there was just less inventory,
Right.
and they just don't have the money to compete.
And,
So it's
and the prices are higher, right? I mean, where is a starter home price in our area now, right? I mean, most people that are in their late 20s, early 30s, may not, like what's the average price of a home in Westchester? Michelle, do you know that off the top of your head?
2,500.
I'm sorry,
That's
you cut out. How much?
862,000.
Yeah, 862,000. I mean, I don't know. Here's the thing.
Right.
Salaries haven't increased that much from like when I was in my 20s to where they are now, people just
Right.
coming out of college, right? I talk to I've got a lot of friends my age who have kids that are, in their mid 20s and such, and they're coming out of school and maybe they're making 65,000 a year. Guess what, folks? You can't buy an $860,000 home on a $65,000 a year salary. The conforming loan limits, which is what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac set out, they will have more than doubled in the last 20 years. So I want to say back in like 2010, the conforming loan limit was around 400,000. They have not formally announced them yet, but I have heard but it's going to be above 800,000. It's going up from its current conforming limit of like 765. It's going to be over 800,000. That means that anything above 801, 802 will now be considered jumbo. So a $700,000 mortgage is not even going to be considered a jumbo mortgage.
Right.
Or it's actually not a jumbo mortgage right now. It's just considered a conforming loan size. So
Things have just
yeah.
increased. I think it's also interesting that 17% of this is nationally, no, not
Mhm.
The National Association of Realtors. 17% of home buyers have bought multi-generational homes, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I am seeing a lot of that right now where I'm doing, multifamily type homes where people want to rent out a portion of the house, and it makes a lot of financial sense,
Well,
for
absolutely, right? Because I think I had just read this week or heard somewhere that people that are the age of like 40 to 60 are, which I'm in that range, are in the sandwich generation where we're still taking care of our kids and now we're taking care of our parents, right? So that would make sense that the percentage of these multi-generational, I mean, I have a mom that lives with me. So I'm right. I'm in that statistic.
So but it's interesting because everybody kind of saves money and they can pool their funds together in many cases, especially if a younger person cannot afford to buy something, but they're investing with their parents. It just helps everybody out. It's very often the parents are taking care of their grandchildren or the
Right.
kids care of their parents or grandparents. So it really, I think it's a plus, but it's very interesting that statistic is 17%, which I think is relatively high, right?
Yeah, it seems high. Yeah, but
but certain areas like in Westchester doesn't, like, there aren't a lot of areas that like sort of lend to that. So you got to really look in certain places, like in certain towns, you will
right,
not find a family house or a four family house. So
right,
you have to pick towns that have those kind of homes or zone for that,
Right.
right. Or where like people buy single homes, and I do a lot of construction loans, and I probably a good portion of them, probably 10% of them right now, in the past couple of years have been people adding on an accessory unit, right? Whether that's for a parent or a kid, or for, maybe I've had them where the kids are now moving into the main house and they're moving into the accessory unit, or vice versa.
I mean, I sold the house, I think it was about a year ago, and I just went to see it. They finished the whole lower level because it was a walkout, right? You had a door out to the backyard with a little patio, and they finished it for the parents who sold their home in Staten Island, actually. So
Yeah,
it's interesting that people are trying to have their families nearby for many different reasons.
right.
Leslie was speaking about that this morning, right? You want your mother-in-law or father-in-law, whomever, to be closer to you. It's just easier.
Right.
That
Right.
was where I brought her up from Florida. So I think it really helps on many levels. I also think that going forward, that it's also interesting to see that most of the people who bought are married couples, which is kind of interesting, and single women have also, I think they've increased their purchases by 20% nationally,
Yes.
not just
Yes.
so
I
that's
feel like I see that as well too. I mean, I think we're starting to see that all of these years of where, more women were graduating from college than men, right? Now they're all in the workplace. There's certainly, it's become much more normal that, actually, let me rephrase this. I would say when I started in this business, it was more common that in a heterosexual couple, the man was out earning the woman.
right.
But that is definitely not the case now. I mean, I would say it's an equal amount of where I have um, couples on the application where they're either earning the same or women are earning more than men. It's definitely not, like that. And I think that women, overall have just tended to be more thoughtful and more careful with their money and investments. And so that statistic doesn't surprise me that a single woman would think about buying a home more than like a single man might, right? He's, living his bachelor life or whatever it might be, and or still at home with his parents, right? But that statistic doesn't surprise me at all.
It's interesting. Also, nationally, they said that 26% of all home purchases have been cash, which is because people have a lot of equity or they've made money in the stock
Yeah.
market or however they've earned the
Saved
money.
a lot of money during the pandemic when you couldn't spend any money.
I definitely, from my perspective, I do see a lot of cash deals. And of course, when you're in a bidding war and there's cash, even
It's
if,
queen.
even if the person is getting a mortgage and it's a higher amount, it's easier to, like, you have less issues when you're
Sure.
closing timelines, things like
Yeah.
that.
Cash.
It's cash, and
I will
you know,
I will say this though, like, and especially in our market where you do have a lot of savvy borrowers, a lot of high income earners, a lot of those cash buyers I do see after they close,
They
right? So they close with cash for tax benefit
right.
purposes, and then they come and they apply for like what's called delayed financing or cash recapture. So a lot of those folks, they still want the benefit of, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're getting a rate of 6%, or if you bring some money over to, if you have money with a bank, you're going to probably get a rate in the fives. That's still relatively inexpensive money to borrow. They still want the write-off, but I see a lot of that, right? In fact, I just spoke to somebody yesterday that's like buying a $12 million apartment, and he's not closing until the spring of next year. But what he wanted to make sure that he could line up is, he's like, look, I'm going to close all cash because I'm going to get this tax benefit and I'm doing that, and the money that I'm using for this, but I want to make sure that I'm lined up and that I can get this amount of mortgage after I close all cash. So that's also a very, people should think about that too, right? Maybe if you have the cash, you go in to make your strong offer and win
Right.
the bid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get some of that cash back so that you can then reinvest it. I mean, look, stock market's doing well right
Right.
now, so
Right.
yeah.
Right. I think also going forward, I think one of the biggest problems is the inventory, right? I think that's a national problem. I
Yeah.
can tell you in our market, whether you're in Westchester or Long Island or even in probably Connecticut,
Anywhere.
I'm not that familiar, the inventory is really very, very tight. However, compared to last February, when it was a 2.9% month supply, it's increased to about a 4.3 month supply, which is much better. I think
Double.
the balanced supply would be 5 to 6% nationally, but
Okay.
at least it's starting to improve. Hopefully, that people eventually, if the rates start to drop, maybe towards the 5% mark, or even 5.5%,
Right.
more people will enter the market. More people will be more inclined to put their home on the market.
Yes.
Right. Supply will increase, and hopefully there'll be maybe more construction in the market. So
Yeah.
I think that these are all plus, good signs, positive
Agreed.
signs. And it depends, since we have a new president, what will happen going forward with regard to interest rates, with regard to taxes, real estate
Right.
taxes.
Right, absolutely. Everything's gonna, I think a lot of things are gonna hold off till he takes office.
So we see what happens.
Right.
Right.
I think so. It's a really wait and see, but I think that people are, at least from what I could see, very positive that the fact that the stock market is really taken off and really doing very well.
Yeah.
I think it's a sign.
Yeah.
And hopefully it will be.
And
So
hopefully.
have a great week.
Have a great
Have a
weekend.
great week,
Be well.
everyone.